Lord be with you. John chapter 4. Okay, I think this is really fun. I once mentioned that I saw a Bible called the Choose Your Own Adventure Bible. And my first thought was, oh boy, that's going to lead people into trouble. But there is an aspect of the Bible where we're not given, what people are thinking. We're not told what they're feeling. We're not told their tone of voice, which would be so incredibly helpful. And so when we come to the woman at the well in John chapter 4, we have to guess, what's going through her heart, what's going through her mind, what has she truly experienced? And so this is my best guess at what's going in on with this woman. But I think there's more than one way to read this. I remember one guy, he unasked for, he just gave me this. He just kept talking on and on about this, this poor, abused, mistreated woman. She was this outcast. She goes to the well in the middle of the day when no one's there and it's really hot. And I mentioned she's an outcast. That's possible. It is possible to interpret that way. She's had 5 husbands, and maybe they all died, or maybe they dumped her because she was an outcast. I don't know. So I'm just going to give you a different interpretation and then run through the evidence with you. Uh, you know, uh, it seems to be that her husbands, her husbands have not died. Okay, that doesn't seem to be the case. You can look at the evidence yourself. As far as her being an outcast, that's generally based on 2 things. One is she's going at the 6th hour, and I think that's it. And she's had 5 husbands. Okay, so let me start with the 6th hour in verse 6. It was about the 6th hour. Now, if you pay attention to John's keeping of time, the Gospel of John, the biggest contradiction we run into is in chapter 19, where it says, it was the 6th hour and Jesus was brought to Pilate or something. And you go, if that's noon, how could he be on the cross at 9 a.m., which the other gospels say he was on the cross at 3 hour, 9 a.m. So it's thought perhaps that the Gospel of John uses more a timekeeping like we do, where you have 6 a.m., 6 p.m., that kind of thing, and that Jesus is here at the well at 6 p.m. So that is a possibility. I can't be dogmatic about it. It does seem to make sense of the 7th hour at the end of chapter 4, where, yesterday at the 7th hour, his fever left him. If the 7th hour was 1 p.m., he probably would have gone home right away and not spent the night and gone home the next day. So you can run through it. I don't want to make too big of a deal about that, but I'm not sure how much of an outcast she is. Because take a look when she says, come and see a man who's told me everything that I ever did. And I can just see every woman and every man in the Samaritan village going, everybody already knew everything that you've already done. It's everywhere. Everybody knew you were a whore or a floozy or a whatever, if that's what she were. So let me give you a different possible understanding. Why would a man divorce a woman back in that culture? It would be if she were displeasing to him. Now, in a male-dominated society where the husband was the head of the house and the absolute ruler, how would a husband treat a woman who stood up for herself and says, no, I'm a strong, integrated woman, and I'm not going to put up with your garbage. I'm not going to put up with your abuse. And if she sticks to it and takes his beatings and whatnot, eventually he's just going to go, yeah, I think I'm done with you. And I'm assuming that the next man who would go and look at her and go, sorry for this, but she's pretty hot. I'll deal with any trouble for that. And the next guy takes her in and goes, oh, I was wrong. And then the next guy and the next guy and the next guy. And then finally she comes to an arrangement with this next guy, the 6th guy. And, it's like, You stay over there, I stay over here, we have our little agreement, and we're not going to be married. Though I will say, in Greek and in Hebrew, the word for male and the word for husband are the same. So it runs into some trend. Usually it doesn't make a difference, but we sometimes talk about that way. You know, a woman will say, "Oh, this is my man," and a guy will say, "Oh, this is my woman," and we mean husband and wife. Okay. So let me run through this, and I'm going to be paraphrasing what the woman is saying. Uh, Paraphrasing. So I hope you know the story, and you'll be able to stop and look at it and go, oh, "Okay, I could read it that way." But I just think this is a load of fun. A guy told me that she's being sarcastic because he watched the Gospel of John video, which is freely available on, I should put a link to that, freely available on YouTube. All right. So Jesus says in verse 7, "Hey, give me a drink." The Samaritan woman in verse 9, "So, Jew boy, you want me to give you a drink? What are you doing talking to a Samaritan woman, Jew boy? You're not allowed to talk to us, are you now?" I don't know if that was sarcastic enough, but I meant it that way. Then Jesus says, "You should ask me and I'll give you living water." And she says in verse 11, "I see, or maybe I don't. You don't have a bucket, and where's your spring water?" Which is what living water would mean in this context, though Jesus does not mean that. And she goes, "Yeah, that's okay. You know who gave us this well? Jacob." Note her pride, by the way, in her people. Again, does this sound like a woman who's beaten and outcast? She takes pride in her Samaritanness. This is Jacob's well. Jacob, their ancestor, the ancestor of Jew and Samaritan. You're not greater than. And in the Greek, at least this is the way I was taught, her question assumes a no answer. It's like, you're not greater, right? No, you're not. Most translations don't bring that out, so I might be wrong, but it's what I was taught. And Jesus says, "Oh, yeah, well, keep drinking this water. You'll just be thirsty again, but I'll give you water that wells up for the life of the age to come," which I think is a better translation than eternal life. I don't know what eternal means, but the life of the age to come, that makes sense to me. And so the woman says, "Oh, sir, sure, give me this water," air quote, however you do that. "Give me this water because I am tired of dragging my weary behind up this hill, down this hill, to this well, what, couple times a day to get all the water that I need, and it's still not enough water. Please give me this water." And then Jesus says, "Sure, just go call your husband. We'll have a chat about it." And I could just see her spitting and going, "I have no husband. I don't need no man." And Jesus goes, "Well, yeah, you're right. You don't have a husband because you've had 5 husbands. And the one you're with now is not your husband." Now, does the woman simply change course? Or does she simply say, "Yeah, I don't need to talk about men"? Again, makes sense to me that she's just, "Yeah, we don't need to talk about men." But, I can just see her saying, "Oh, so you're a prophet. Well, prophet boy, prophesy me this. You Jews worship over there. We Samaritans worship here. Where do we worship?" And again, note her pride in her Samaritan culture and in her Samaritan religion. She's thinking deep theological questions about how and where to worship. And I find that so impressive about this, whatever, down and outcast woman, or just to me, more, this is just an ordinary woman thinking profound thoughts because she's not spending 5 hours a day watching Netflix. Or, as my son says, doom scrolling with Instagram, TikTok, something like that. So they actually thought about important things. And then Jesus, oh man, The hour is coming when neither on this mountain nor in Jerusalem will you worship the Father. You worship what you do not know. The hour is coming and is now here when the worshipers will worship the Father in spirit and truth. And I can just see the woman going, yeah. That's okay. Don't really understand anything that you just said. So, hey, you know what? Jew boy, prophet boy, you know what? I'll just wait for the Messiah. The Messiah is coming. The Christ is coming. God's anointed king is going to show up. God is going to show up with his king, and I'll just wait for him and get the answers. Anyway, that's the way I read it. And I really want to know when she goes and talks to the people, they listen. And not only do they listen, they say in verse 39, they believed, many believed based on the woman's testimony. And then they say to her in verse 42, it is no longer because of what you said that we believe, but we have heard for ourselves and believe that he is the savior of the world. If she were this outcast, if she were this disgraced person that, no one would talk to, no one would listen to, it seems to me she has a bit of standing in that village. And again, I'm wondering if, I'm not saying she's not an outcast, but I am saying she seems to carry a bit of authority. And again, I'm looking at her as being this strong, sarcastic woman who just says things as they are. And, maybe people don't want to hang around with that, but when she speaks, they sure listen. So I find that very interesting, and I could be just completely wrong. But again, it's kind of a choose your own adventure Bible in that you have to actually think about this, look at the evidence that's presented, and in a way, put yourself into her shoes and into your life situation, and you're going to read it kind of differently depending on where you're coming from. And it doesn't make it right or wrong, but sometimes I think there's multiple interpretations, kind of around the edges, as long as you're not spinning too much, right? All right. God bless.